ang boss. Kayo ang lakas. Kayo ang gumagawa ng pagbabago.
From his first State of the Nation address up to the most recent, President Benigno Aquino III has failed to mention the Freedom of Information or FOI bill. He has not certified the bill as urgent either, but one thing is clear, the palace vowed to pass it before his term ends. The proposed FOI law aims to mandate the disclosure of public documents as an assertion for greater government transparency and accountability. Our right to information is guaranteed by no less than the Constitution's Bill of Rights, Article 3, Section 7. But the road to the FOI bill's passage has become steep. The bill spent many months within the committee level. It was just early this year that the Senate passed the FOI bill on its third and final reading with 22 affirmative votes, no abstentions, and no negative votes. The bill, however, is awaiting its fate in the lower house's committee level. While the bill's supporters see a light of hope, some also disagree with the current FOI bill version pushed by the Senate and the Congress.
Hindi ko natin dapat bigyan ng lisensya yung pong mga mandarambong at mga kriminal sa ating pong pamahalaan na gamitin ang mismong freedom of information para hindi ho tayo makakuha ng impormasyon sa kanila pong mga kasalanan.
Aren't we really open to discussing at full length amendments to this? Para naman malagyan natin ng pangil, Mr. Chair, ang FOI bill.
The Makabayan Bloc, for instance, demands a so-called People's FOI law because they consider the current version to be watered down and even included more restrictions opposite to the real essence of the FOI bill. Welcome to Opposing Views, a hard, straightforward discussion of today's most pressing issues. We, the ordinary citizens, have a right to information held by the government. But a working right to information law gives flesh to the principle that public office is a public trust. Now, tonight, we have a consensus here that our country needs an FOI law. But which version? What should it contain? And what are the parameters? Are our legislators taming down the fangs of a genuine FOI law? Those are the questions for tonight. So we ask, is the Consolidated Freedom of Information Bill weak? Good evening, I'm Rod Nepomuceno, and this is Opposing Views. All right, joining us tonight, our discussion is Mr. Benji Oliveros, a spokesperson of Alternative Media. Good evening, Benji.
Good evening, Attorney Rod.
All right, in 30 seconds, can you give us a summary of your position on that question? Is the current FOI bill pending in Congress weak?
Yes, because one, it has too many broad formulations of exceptions, and two, it has no teeth.
All right. On the opposing side is former Quezon Province Representative Congressman Lorenzo Tañada III. Good evening, Aaron.
Yes, good evening, Rod, Benji.
Right. Can you give us your quick position on this question?
Well,
do you think it's weak?
Well, I don't think it's weak. No, first of all, it has not been tested. We'd always say that we'd try to come out with the best FOI bill that we could legislate. As a matter of fact, if you look at the bill right now, its template came from the 14th and 15th Congress. And maybe the reason why some people are criticizing it, it all depends really on what are the exceptions they feel should be removed and not. But in my case, it's a step forward. And the bill can stand the scrutiny of the different stakeholders. And as a matter of fact, discussions have been held with regard to this piece of legislation. And all of them are of the opinion that it's a good law.
All right. Thank you very much, Congressman Aaron, and of course, Benji Oliveros. So, Benji, I'll throw the first question to you. You said that it's weak. Now, the whole principle of the FOI bill, I guess the spirit behind it is transparency and accountability.
Yes.
And I think everyone kind of agrees, no? In fact, the Senate, I think 22 votes, no abstentions and no negative votes, no? So everyone agrees that we should have an FOI bill.
Yes.
But you're saying that the current bill that's now pending in Congress is watered down, it's weak, and you mentioned that because of the exceptions. Can you detail further why, or maybe give us more details on these weak points, these contentious points?
Well, first of all, we believe in the principle that a a genuine freedom of information bill should follow the presumption of maximum disclosure. And second, that any limitation should be narrowly and clearly defined. Now, in this case, we find a lot of very broad formulations in exceptions.
Vague
right?
exceptions. All right.
Vague exceptions that could be interpreted many different ways. No? So, in essence, the law could even be used by those who want to keep some government records a secret. They could say, the law says, oh, it would unduly weaken the negotiating position of the government.
So they can make any kind of excuse.
They can make any kind. Oh, it's here that we cannot release the records of minutes. Now, that brings to mind our experience with, remember the investigation of the NBN-ZT scandal,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
Where then Secretary Romulo Neri was asked, were
Yeah.
you given a bribe? He said, yes, I was offered. So did you tell the president? And he said, yes. So can you tell us what was the reaction of the president? And he said, oh, that's executive. No,
You're saying that in the present law, the way it's worded, they can still avail of that excuse.
Yes.
All right, Erin, you were one of the authors, right, pushing for this bill, actually.
Oh, yes.
And
In my 3 terms in Congress.
right, and first of all, thank you, because I think the country needs it. No, you think that this consolidated version, that I think there are 24 versions, you think it's so far off from your original version?
No, as a matter of fact, there's no intellectual property rights in Congress, right? You know that.
Yes.
If you look at the 24 versions, the only difference is the number, the House bill number, and the author. Basically,
Yes, I've
everything.
seen those bills. No? They're usually copied. Talaga,
Yes,
no?
and only
Maybe a couple of
maybe
changes.
for some few provisions, let's say, for example, the one that came from Antonino, no, Nandes, saying that with regard to certain privacy issues of government officials, no, maybe that has to be revisited. And that came into a discussion with the stakeholders and with the champions, no, the members of the House who were pushing for the bill. Now, with regard to the comments of Benji, I would always say that if you look and study the provisions itself, there's always that provision there that presumes, no, if a government agency claims the exception, there is a provision in the law that says the presumption is still for the release of such document.
So the burden of proof is still with the government.
Yes.
To show that it's part of the exception.
Yes.
Okay.
So I would say that this is a step forward from the usual position that no, we
Parang
can't.
may discretion sila on to say what the exception is.
And you're the one, the person who's asking for the information has to prove why. Now it's the reverse.
Okay, I'll ask you a question and I'll throw the question to you, Benji. Now. Do you agree with the president's critics they're saying that Pinoy effectively will pass the FOI law right before he steps down? Apply to his presidency?
I wouldn't know the motives of the president. No, I did my best during my 3 terms in Congress to try to get this pushed in the legislative mill, and the closest that it went was during the 14th Congress. It passed both the House and the Senate. And then we went to BICAM. We came out with one report. The Senate ratified the report. The House, on the last session day, suddenly questioned the quorum when, in fact, we knew that there was a quorum.
All right. Okay, Benji, your thoughts on this about the president's, what the president's critics are saying? He's not making it urgent. He's kind of dribbling it until such time that he'll pass it right before time expires with regards to his term.
Well, he hasn't certified it as an urgent bill.
So do you feel that he's kind of doing it so that he kind of escapes its fangs, so to speak?
And he's been saying that there's no need for an FOI bill. Anyway, we're transparent. So it seems that he doesn't feel the need for it.
Well, to answer that, Rod, no, I shared their frustrations also because I've been wanting that the bill be certified. But there are also constitutional provisions that go into how a bill is certified in Congress. But the fact that at least he mentioned it as a priority bill in this second regular session is already a step forward also for the president, because I never heard it in
Yeah.
in my last term in Congress, no, in 2010 up to 2013. I met in the State of the Nation address of the President, which I was hoping to hear it. Wala eh.
Ah, okay.
So at least ngayon, binanggit, no?
Okay.
Kasama sa priorities, at you could see also from the Speaker's pronouncements last week
Yes.
that it is also included and hopefully will be passed by the first quarter of next year.
Benji, your thoughts. I'd like you to react, I guess, with the comments of Congressman Erin earlier when he was saying that it's not actually watered down. It's not too far off from the original bill. I don't know if you've had a chance to study some of the original versions, or perhaps the version of the Makabayan block. No? But do you think that there were additions there, and if so, can you point them out that talagang really open a Pandora's box, if you will, of possible excuses on the part of the government?
Well, I have outlined some exceptions that we think
What
are too broad.
Can you highlight? Can you highlight the ones that are sticking out?
Like
your radar?
records of minutes. No? You cannot have access to records of minutes until the policy has been formulated and the decisions have been made.
Okay. Now you feel that that's vital information?
I think that's vital information. How can the people participate in the formulation of policies if you can have access to records of minutes? Or even unduly weakened, what do you mean by unduly weakened, the negotiating position of the government? What comes to my mind is the negotiations regarding the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. People were asking, what's the content?
Yeah.
They would say, oh, we cannot disclose that, but there are the contentious issues and we're leading towards that. What are the contentious issues? We cannot discuss that. But
Okay.
they could have just identified the contentious issues. So we're talking about, there's a debate regarding operational control over the access locations. They could have said that, and we could have taken a position that, well, we should have control over it. Then that even strengthens the government's position.
Right.
Or regarding rent, we could have said there should be rent if they can stay. They want to stay here. At first, they should not stay here, but if they want to stay here, they should pay rent. It was never mentioned.
Never mentioned.
What happened was the U.S. has operational control. There's no rent.
Okay, good point. Unfortunately, we need to take a short break. Meanwhile, you can join the debate via Facebook at facebook.com/opposingviews on 9TV or tweet your thoughts at opposing_views. Use the hashtag OVFOIlaw. Stay tuned. Opposing Views will be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views. I'm Nepomuceno. We have with us Mr. Benji Oliveros, spokesperson of Alternative Media, and on the opposing side is former Quezon Province Representative Congressman Lorenzo Erin Tañada III. Our debate question for tonight is the Consolidated Freedom of Information Bill week. Benji, let me ask you, do you feel that the government is transparent enough? Because they're saying that, no, we're going to give the information anyway.
Well, selective transparency.
Selective transparency. So you think it's not enough, obviously?
It's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not
Now,
enough.
do you think it's right for media organizations like yourself, like Alternative Media, for example, and your allies? You think it's right for you guys to withdraw support from the FOI bill that's currently pending?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the media as an amalgamation of everybody having the same position, right?
Yeah.
There are even some of our friends from the media would say, well, it's better than nothing. No? So
Right. I think that
I'm
seems
just
to be-
talking about our
Yeah.
position.
That seems to be the sentiment, no? Even in the Senate, they passed it. No? In your case, will you throw a fit or will you go out there and protest if let's say, as is,
because
the bill was passed?
our basic problem here is that these can even be used to constrict and to restrict our rights.
So you're
access
saying it
information.
might be even worse?
Yeah, it might even be used against the freedom of information.
Okay. Erin, your thoughts on that? Do you think it's going to be worse?
No, I don't think it'll be worse. I think, again, I'd fall back to that provision that I cited that
The presumption.
Yes, the presumption is always in favor of the release of the information. So it's a step forward. And from the media's point of view, the first question when we were trying to get the support of media, we don't need an FOI anyway. We have our resources to to get the information we need, no? But when we were trying to sell the FOI bill, this is not only for the media, but for people in general. And so if the people are properly informed, they would make proper decisions. So we feel that the bill is a step forward in getting the information to the people.
Kasi if you study the bill, Benji, I mean, there is a process when you're applying for information. There's a process, and there's 15 days, 15 working days that they have to give the information, and after that they have to notify, right?
Yes.
They have to notify you about the grounds for refusing the information access. No, what happens pala if there's no notification, if there's no reply?
Well, you go to the next step.
Next step, which is the ombudsman, and then so with these processes, do you think that there's enough safeguards for the people to get the information they want, or do you still feel that the contentious points you mentioned, like the lack of access to the minutes and the advice given in opinions and expressed during deliberations or decision making and policy formulation, access to information on defense and police operations, those are exceptions, diba? And the information withheld from the public on the ground of premature disclosure, you kind of pointed those out. No? Why do you think that these are important?
Well, for one, I would agree that it's a step forward. But my problem is it also brings us 2 steps backward.
You think? Okay. Because of
We'll always debate that.
Because of these exceptions, yeah.
Because of these exceptions, they could, of course, the presumption is openness. No? They would say presumption is openness, but we would say the government agency could say, no, we cannot because it's national security, it's an executive agreement. So how can we move forward?
Yeah. Do you think, Erin, that those exceptions
these are tested. These are tested judicial cases, no, which the Supreme Court came out with regard to the issue of national security. We all know that. We know the parameters that national security calls for. We know what executive privilege is. Now,
so those things still exist. I mean, we can't remove those.
Yes, and it even exists in other governments, in other countries. And for me, I welcome the position of the Makabayan Bloc because it even further crystallizes the records of the debate, so that when the Supreme Court suddenly reviews the records, they can always refer to the points that the Makabayan Bloc is raising, in order to come out with a better decision if any provision in the FOI bill is questioned.
Okay. Do you think, though, that, Benji, that because of these exceptions, it might be considered unconstitutional, and therefore, let's say your group, for example, might file a case questioning its constitutionality?
Of course, because Section 7 also of the Constitution guarantees the freedom of information.
Right. As may be provided by law.
As may be provided by law.
That's the big part.
Yeah, that's the big part.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of constitutional provisions that provide for that, as provided by law. Right?
Yes.
So, but since there's a lot of that, don't you think, Benji, that this is kind of a reasonable parameter to have in this law?
Again, I've always believed in the principle that the presumption of maximum disclosure and all exceptions should be clearly and narrowly defined.
And this is where the debate comes in on the floor. This is where the definitions can be sharpened. You know, when questions raised by the Makabayan Bloc are discussed intelligently in the floor and they be voted upon. Because if the positions of the Makabayan Bloc are clearly defined or clearly
outlined,
explained to the members of the House, I'm sure.
Then it would have been deliberated on.
No, I'm sure in the plenary, it hasn't anyway passed yet the plenary. It can be even further crystallized and amended.
So okay, you're just for the passing of the bill to the plenary.
Yes.
Para then it can be crystallized.
Mas
crystallized. Okay. Now, Erin, Section 14 says a mere denial is not a ground for liability. You know? So a mere denial in good faith of a request made pursuant to the provisions of this act shall not constitute grounds for administrative sanctions or criminal liability. Now, how do we define good faith?
Well, we would define good faith as if there was an attempt by the person holding the information in trying to ask his superior if he would be violating any provisions of the exceptions.
So there might be some gray area information, diba?
Yes, and if he shows that he was asking, then you could see that he was not sure, so this might be
So
a
there's
good faith. There was
certain
no
good
malicious
faith-
intent.
No malicious intent to withhold it lang.
Yeah.
All right. Do you think that that's a good parameter to have already by just merely saying that a person in government can escape liability by just claiming good faith?
Again, that's another problem. But how do you define good faith? Of course, the government always says that there's presumption of regularity. So, how could you
So
say?
yeah, how does that work?
acted as
Because there's a
good faith?
presumption of regularity now.
Yes.
And I guess in doing your duty as a government official, performing your duties, there's a presumption of
Regularity. Well,
regularity.
that's what we're taught in law school.
Right.
Ron,
And
no.
so is the good faith, and now the good faith clause can then be, you think that there's a potential that this can be abused?
Abuse, maybe not. Maybe not. Again, this is the reason why further debate on the floor should
We'll be able to
happen.
crystallize that.
Yes.
Kasi
and it should-
there would be a conflict between the presumption that the person has right to access the information.
Yes.
Vis-a-vis the presumption of regularity.
Yes.
There will be a conflict.
Yes, but if you go back to that provision again, that the burden of proof now is against government, no, then you can already now balance whether good faith
okay.
was
Parang
exercised
it's
or
the
not.
non-bailable debate,
Yes.
diba? The burden of proof
Yes,
is shifted.
it shifted.
Okay. All right, we need to take a short break. Keep tweeting and posting comments on our social media pages. More issues on the proposed FOI law when we return. You're watching Opposing Views. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching Opposing Views. I'm Nepomuceno. Still with us, Mr. Benji Oliveros, spokesperson of Alternative Media, and former Quezon Province Representative Congressman Lorenzo Erin Tañada III. Our question is the Consolidated Freedom of Information Bill weak. Now, just before the break, Erin, you were making a point that the presumption now is for the government to provide the access to information, diba? Requested.
Yes.
Okay. So whereas before it was more of the exception, meaning you have to. In other words, it was the discretion was in the part of the government.
Yeah, no, the presumption is for the release of the information. Government now has to prove that why should it
Why
not?
it should not, all right? Okay, now, but we've also talked about, Benji brought about the point of a presumption of regularity.
Yes.
On the part of a government official. So therefore, if the government official says, sorry, I can't give it, there is that presumption of regularity na he's acting in good faith. Benji, that was, and your point is that the previous presumption, the former presumption, will be the one that's followed. Benji, your thoughts on that? Do you think that that's the case, or do you think some government officials will take advantage of the other presumption which is the presumption of regularity in claiming good faith?
Yeah, because that's my problem. Who defines good faith? Who determines whether the person acted in good faith?
You're saying
I'm quite allergic with the term good, with that principle of good faith. I remember the disbursement acceleration program, and the president and budget secretary Abad said, we acted in good faith.
Okay. And you're allergic to that.
I'm allergic to that.
If you think about it, the word good faith is a very positive, and then you're allergic to it. Anyway, I want to get your comments, gentlemen, on some notes or quotes made by some personalities regarding the FOI law. And Erin, I'll throw the first one to you. Parañaque Representative Gus Tambuting said, and I quote, I feel that more serious support from Malacanang is exactly what we need in order to spur debates on this bill. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree, because if you look at the past, from the time that the president came into power up to the time that he finally said during that daylight dialogue with the business sector, you heard nothing really concrete with regard to the position of the president.
Yeah.
Only in one occasion, when there was the LEDAC meeting.
Yes.
I was present there. That was during the 15th Congress, and he mentioned upon a question by Ramon Del Rosario Jr. He mentioned that he would create a task force, no, a study group that would study the provisions of the bill on the FOI, which I authored at the time, and that study group engaged us, no, in the 15th Congress, and this is the reason why certain sections on the FOI bill includes proposals from that study group of created by the president.
All right. Are those proposals the exceptions
Well,
or not really?
if you look
Or
at
some
it,
of them?
one was already included with regard to the national security. The second one with regard to executive privilege. No, so
Okay.
we just had to go back what were the decisions of the Supreme Court with regard to this, and the third that they included, which is very important, I think, was which people should take note of, is the mandatory posting on the websites of the statements of assets and liabilities and network
And those were
of the
included.
high officials of this government.
And that was included in the must release information?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, Benji, what are your thoughts on with regard to those statements, those phrases mentioned by Erin, mga executive privilege, confidential, and classified information? Are you allergic to those terms as well?
Executive privilege.
Yeah. Do you think
that is
do you think
already
there's
been a
the-
contentious point even
Yeah,
during the previous administration.
Do you think the president should have such executive privilege? I said there's some information that the government might know, but that might cause panic in the streets, diba? You think that that kind of information they should withhold from the public, if only to preserve peace and order?
Of course, there are some information that could be withheld. No.
Okay.
For example, if the president is contemplating on declaring war or asking Congress to declare war,
So
of
you
course
feel
that should be withheld.
Okay.
No, in the meantime, until
Yeah.
it was being formally announced. No.
Kasi may mga certain military or police or security, I guess, actions that will be compromised if all the information is
Yeah.
readily available. Right?
Especially with tactical ongoing military and police,
police,
operations. Tactical ongoing. Not
But-
all legitimate, so-called legitimate military operations.
But the current one says that information pertaining to internal or external defense, law enforcement, and border control, that's an exception.
Unduly
So you
compromised.
have an issue with that.
These unduly compromise or interfere with any legitimate military or law enforcement operation.
Yeah.
Interfere, yes. No, if it would interfere in tactical, for example, they're going to get a drug lord, and then
Yeah.
people from the media would ask, "Oh, what's the status of your operation?
Oh, where
what have
is
you
he?
captured so far?" Of course, we cannot disclose that. No? But again,
So you talk about tactical, the ones that are happening
tactical,
right now.
that's
But otherwise, other kind of information, let's say, the houses of generals or something.
Yep.
That's what you're referring to.
Even that.
Okay yun, dapat
okay yun.
yun.
That's it.
Oo,
Okay.
dapat yun eh, di ba?
Salin yun eh.
All right.
Dapat
Or
nakalista
even,
yun.
they cannot say that it's a legitimate military operation, so we cannot disclose that. Even if it's after the fact. That, in this view, I think it could be done. No?
So you're saying if it's after the fact, then all kind of military operations, what happened there, and the tactics and strategies that they employed, that should come out. All right.
That should disclose.
All
For
right.
example, why? For example, in the Jonas Burgos case or in the Olaya case, they cannot say that, oh, that has been a legitimate military operation, we cannot disclose that. Who's your commanding officer? We cannot disclose that.
Di ba? Di
And
pwede yan.
that creates problems no, in
Well,
terms of seeking
I would
justice.
the way I'd answer that. Then let's test it in court. No, bring that particular provision out, and let the courts decide on how they would define what are tactical operations if the law itself does not provide the definition that is.
Because usually that's what happens with laws anyway.
Yes.
They get tested in the
Yes.
Supreme Court. All right, we need to take a short break. Don't go away. When we come back, the final points of our guests and the results of our ongoing online poll on the issue. Stay tuned. You're watching Opposing Views. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Opposing Views. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. Still with us, Mr. Benji Oliveros, spokesperson of Alternative Media. And on the opposing side is former Quezon Province Representative Congressman Lorenzo Erin Tañada III. Our question, is the Consolidated Freedom of Information Bill weak? All right. This is a question I would like to pose to both of you, gentlemen. Give concrete examples on how the FOI law would apply and to support your view. We'll start with you, Erin.
The problem that people are saying right now is access to SALN, statements of assets and liabilities and net worth.
Yeah.
And with the bill right now that is still going to be deliberated in the plenary in the House, there is a provision there on mandatory posting of statements of assets and liabilities and net worth of the President, the Vice President, members of the Supreme Court, members of the different constitutional commissions, members of the Senate, members of the House of Representatives, members of the Cabinet, generals in both the Armed Forces and the Philippine National Police. These automatically need to be posted on their websites.
Mandate dyan.
Yes.
These are all required.
So this would help people now find out whether these public officials are living within their means, within or sourcing funds from other illegal.
So you feel that alone is a step forward?
It's a step forward.
Even just that alone?
Yes.
All right. Benji, give an example of how you think the FOI law would apply to support your position that it's weak and it shouldn't pass generally.
Well, I've given the example regarding
Yeah.
the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement.
Yeah, okay,
They
all
could
right.
always say that, well, we cannot disclose to you the contentious issues because that would weaken the position of the government.
You think that that's a vague provision?
Yes,
it would
that's a
weaken
vague
the
provision.
position
Or
of the
they
government.
could say that in the Olalia Alay case, we can disclose that because that's a legitimate, it will compromise a legitimate military operation. Or in the Jonas Burgos case, we asked, for example, can we look at the log of how that vehicle used in the abduction of Jonas landed in the headquarters of the army? They could say, oh, that's a legitimate military operation. We cannot disclose that.
So with those examples, those are the examples you feel that could be potential scenarios if this law is passed. All right.
Even the SALN, no, it's subject to rules and regulations and to exceptions.
You have to look at the different other laws with regard to the issue on the SALN. There's the constitutional provision that requires public disclosure. There's the law on ethical standards that also requires public.
That's what you mean. That's what you mean about subject to other laws.
Yes.
The way they should.
Yes.
And not as an exception.
Not as an exception
to offering that information.
Yes,
All right.
and because the requirement here is mandatory posting on websites.
Okay. What's your comment, Benji, on this quote from House Public Information Committee Chair Representative Almonte? And I quote, "The consolidated FOI bill is both progressive but well balanced." Do you think it's well balanced?
Well, that's
You
our
think it's
problem.
progressive?
That is our problem. Our position always is maximum disclosure.
Maximum disclosure. You think it's not balanced?
Yeah, it's not bad. Maximum disclosure, narrow limitation.
Did you see the Makabayan
Exceptions.
Block's version?
Yes.
Yeah, do you think that that's the version that we should have?
Yes.
And specifically, what provision in that Makabayan Block version would you like to have or retain or
Well, we would want to
remove the exceptions?
remove a lot of these exceptions and to
Okay,
define
all right.
and what would be retained should be specifically and clearly defined. Like, for example, Makabayan would propose that it should not interfere with tactical, ongoing military and police operations.
Okay, so that
So
one.
the
you wanna remove.
tactical and ongoing should clearly define it.
Be defined. Okay. Now, in case this consolidated version, as is passed, you think this will at least aid in your journalism practice? Do you think it's a step forward, at least in that regard?
Well, of course, that's our hope.
Yeah.
But our problem is this may also be used to restrict access to
your
information.
access,
They
okay.
could say, oh, Section 7A stipulates that.
Okay. All right. Now, I'll ask this to both of you gentlemen. Do you think the president will ever certify the bill as urgent? Benji, do you think he will? How do you read the president?
Well, during the beginning of his term, he said yes. He feels that it should be passed before his term ends. Then we heard him saying that we don't need it because anyway the government is transparent. I will not judge the intentions or the motivations, but he hasn't certified it yet.
Aaron, do you think he will?
Well, again, there are certain requirements in order a bill should be certified
As urgent,
as
okay.
urgent. The fact that he had already come out to make it a priority bill is already, again, a step forward in my opinion. And so I would think that he is serious in saying that he would want to see this bill passed before his term ends.
All right. Okay. We have a few minutes left, and I'll ask you, the both of you, to kind of sum up your position. Again, we're doing this for the information of our viewers. So that,
Transparency.
yeah, to expand, that's the segue there, to expand their knowledge regarding this bill, which I think is very key, no, to every Filipino. So, Benji, I'll start off with you. Can you give a summary again of your position for those who have just tuned in, and why you don't support the current version of the FOI bill?
Well, our basic premise is one, laws that seek to enable the people to exercise their rights should have much leeway as possible. And our position is that there should be presumption of maximum disclosure, and any limitation should be clearly and narrowly defined. So with that, we feel that a lot of the exceptions here they're too many and they're too broadly defined. And that's why we feel that this could even be used to restrict information rather than facilitate the access to information.
All right. Thank you very much, Benji Oliveros. And Congressman, your final words.
Well, thank you, Rod, and of course, thank you, Benji. We would always like to hear comments from our friends from the Makabayan Bloc because it helps crystallize positions. We feel that the FOI bill, as it is a step forward, no? And this is what the people have been waiting for quite some time. It would help our countrymen seek the information they need in order to come up with the proper decisions in their lives. And this Freedom of Information Bill went through not only the scrutiny of the Committee on Public Information of both houses, but it was passed. It went through discussions with different stakeholders: labor, students, media, business. And I think if at the end of the day, if you would compare this Freedom of Information Bill with other Freedom of Information bills of other countries, it would rank as very good, no, compared to the others.
All right. Okay. So overall,
Yeah.
it's a positive,
Yeah.
positive law. All
If
right.
you would say ideal is 10 out of 10, I would say this is around 8.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much to our guests, Mr. Benji Oliveros, spokesperson of Alternative Media, and former Quezon Province Representative Lorenzo Tañada III. Now let's see the results of our online poll. We ask you, our guests, or our viewers, is the Consolidated Freedom of Information Bill weak? Those who answered yes, 60%, it's weak. And those who answered no, 40%. And that's our opposing views for tonight. Tune in again next week for another bold and engaging discussion on today's most pressing issues. I'm Rod Nepomuceno. Good night. God bless. Happy weekend.
ang boss. Kayo ang lakas. Kayo ang gumagawa ng pagbabago.
From his first State of the Nation address up to the most recent, President Benigno Aquino III has failed to mention the Freedom of Information or FOI bill. He has not certified the bill as urgent either, but one thing is clear, the palace vowed to pass it before his term ends. The proposed FOI law aims to mandate the disclosure of public documents as an assertion for greater government transparency and accountability. Our right to information is guaranteed by no less than the Constitution's Bill of Rights, Article 3, Section 7. But the road to the FOI bill's passage has become steep. The bill spent many months within the committee level. It was just early this year that the Senate passed the FOI bill on its third and final reading with 22 affirmative votes, no abstentions, and no negative votes. The bill, however, is awaiting its fate in the lower house's committee level. While the bill's supporters see a light of hope, some also disagree with the current FOI bill version pushed by the Senate and the Congress.
Hindi ko natin dapat bigyan ng lisensya yung pong mga mandarambong at mga kriminal sa ating pong pamahalaan na gamitin ang mismong freedom of information para hindi ho tayo makakuha ng impormasyon sa kanila pong mga kasalanan.
Aren't we really open to discussing at full length amendments to this? Para naman malagyan natin ng pangil, Mr. Chair, ang FOI bill.
The Makabayan Bloc, for instance, demands a so-called People's FOI law because they consider the current version to be watered down and even included more restrictions opposite the real essence of the FOI bill. Welcome to Opposing Views, a hard, straightforward discussion of today's most pressing issues. We, the ordinary citizens, have a right to information held by the government. But a working right to information law gives flesh to the principle that public office is a public trust. Now, tonight, we have a consensus here that our country needs an FOI law. But which version? What should it contain? And what are the parameters? Are our legislators taming down the fangs of a genuine FOI law? Those are the questions for tonight. So we ask, is the Consolidated Freedom of Information Bill weak? Good evening, I'm Rod Nepomuceno, and this is Opposing Views. All right, joining us tonight, our discussion is Mr. Benji Oliveros, a spokesperson.
In my case, it's a step forward, and the bill can stand the scrutiny of the different stakeholders. And as a matter of fact, discussions have been held with regard to this piece of legislation, and all of them are of the opinion that it's a good law.
All right, thank you very much, Congressman Erin, and of course, Benji Oliveros. Now, Benji, I'll throw the first question to you. You said that it's weak. Now, the whole principle of the FOI bill, I guess the spirit behind it is transparency and accountability.
Yes.
And I think everyone kind of agrees, no? In fact, the Senate, I think 22 votes, no abstentions and no negative votes, no? So everyone agrees that we should have an FOI bill.
Yes.
But you're saying that the current bill that's now pending in Congress is watered down, it's weak, and you mentioned that because of the exceptions. Can you detail further why, or maybe give us more details on these weak points, these contentious points?
Well, first of all, we believe in the principle that a genuine freedom of information bill should follow the presumption of maximum disclosure. And second, that...
Of alternative media. Good evening, Benji.
Good evening, Attorney Rod.
All right, in 30 seconds, can you give us a summary of your position on that question? Is the current FOI bill pending in Congress weak?
Yes, because one, it has too many broad formulations of exceptions, and two, it has no teeth.
All right. On the opposing side is former Quezon Province Representative Congressman Lorenzo Tañada III. Good evening, Erin.
Yes, good evening, Rod, Benji.
Right. Can you give us your quick position on this question?
Well,
Do you think it's weak?
Well, I don't think it's weak. No, first of all, it has not been tested. We'd always say that we'd try to come out with the best FOI bill that we could legislate. As a matter of fact, if you look at the bill right now, its template came from the 14th and 15th Congress. And maybe the reason why some people are criticizing it. It all depends really on what are the exceptions they feel should be removed and not. But